Everyone good? All right, we'll try and bring a little energy and keep this going today. Hey everyone, I'm Tim Sauvé. I'm Chief Partnerships Officer at CreatorIQ. I'm here with amazing guests. They're going to introduce themselves as we dive into it, but let's go straight in. So really what we're going to talk about today is this concept of a center of excellence, or really the need to bring a centralized team to influencer marketing. Why now? Why is this happening? You heard Chris, our CEO, talk about scale. Creators are posting 33 times the amount of content that brands are on social, right? There's a need for centralized teams, strategies, technologies to be implemented. Really, when you get to Adobe, where tens of thousands of creators are posting about Adobe products in a given year, or PepsiCo, it's well over 100,000 creators are talking about Pepsi products in hundreds of markets. You'll get into the teams, the agencies, and everything that really needs to pull this together. Really why this exists is because Creator now sits across social, PR, media, affiliate, on down the line, insights, measurement. And so this center of excellence or these centralized teams really bring that expertise or everything together to be able to work across those different groups. So let's get into it. I'm going to go ahead and start with the first question. So we want to talk about the scale, right? So when we think about scale, Kate, maybe start with you. How do you think about scale in your organization, and is it underappreciated? Do your colleagues, your executives understand the types of levels you're working at?
Thanks, Tim, and nice to be here. My name is Kate Brady. I lead creative and content transformation across PepsiCo. So to answer your question, I think at PepsiCo I'm grateful that they do appreciate it, but I do think many organizations are not there yet. I think that the tides are shifting, though, and we are seeing that transformation. Where at PepsiCo, we have stood up our Creator CoE over the past several months, and we're in the process of building out a global creator network because we recognize that personalization at scale isn't just about data and algorithms, it's really about those human voices and connections that you can make. And when you're able to enable an army of creators to champion your brands in their unique perspective and their voice, that beats whatever type of corporate channel messaging that you can give out. So it's a great opportunity to speak to your consumers with a language that they trust, that they believe, shared context of their views, and that's really much more impactful than what we're seeing in the traditional space to date. So we see a lot of opportunity here, and I'm excited that PepsiCo is fully on board from their leadership perspective.
That's amazing. Leah, how do you think about it at Adobe?
Hi, I'm Leah. I lead influencer and creator marketing at Adobe. Thanks for having me. I think at Adobe, there is a lot of appreciation for the power of creators and influencer marketing at scale. I think where the gap is it's still seen as a tactic rather than a full marketing function. I think the power of the CoE is that we are able to recognize the power of influencer and creator across the full funnel of marketing and figure out the best ways to implement it at all of those stages. So it's not just a tactic that you kind of add on to a campaign at the end or kind of as you're building out the whole thing, but it's something that powers the campaign itself and that can power content throughout each part of it. So we'll probably get into more of that, but it's really truly becoming its own marketing function, which I'm very excited about.
And Robert, I'm sure you have a pretty unique view at BCG, because you're not in a single organization. You're working across, hundreds. BCG is working across hundreds, thousands of organizations. What's your point of view?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. Robert Duro, Managing Director and Partner at BCG. I lead our digital growth and our CX group, which basically helps clients accelerate and transform their full funnel marketing, and creators definitely at the core there. I think the way we like to think about it is, influence at scale comes from content at scale, and we like to think about content as really fuel for influence. And how can you get enough content in this day and age? There's kind of 4 C's that we like to think about. So first is you create. And so this is kind of your studio, your brand content, your celebrity content, and can really be historically kind of the bedrock or the cornerstone. But then we're also seeing massive curation, obviously, from your broad base of influencers. And then you have more commercial style content from affiliate type of influencers. And then lastly, really your community, your long tail, your tribes, your brand advocates. And so really, how do you pull together all this content to fuel personalization? Because the algorithms have been there from a media perspective historically, and the bottleneck's always been creative. And so we're particularly excited about this explosion in content and creative.
So Leah, I think the COE or your centralized team is pretty new to Adobe, right? Can you talk a little bit about your journey, how you've got there as an organization? 'Cause this isn't something that for most orgs that have been around for years and years and years.
No, and like I said, it's very new at Adobe that we're kind of spinning it out as its own marketing function. We started where influencer strategy was incorporated into overall social strategy, but we found that kind of as the function scaled, all of the inefficiencies scaled too. So we were having, there were so many different disparate programs. We didn't have oversight over all of them. We weren't able to collectively measure them. We weren't able to get learnings from them. We weren't able to kind of evangelize across the company what these success stories were. And so it really became clear that we needed a central team to oversee all of the partnerships that were happening across the company. And I'm telling you, there are like hundreds a month. So that's where it clearly became a need. And I'm excited. We're kind of in the process of forming that right now. So it's a really exciting time, and it's a really, I think we have the opportunity to kind of set the operating model for not only Adobe, but I think kind of other companies as well.
Yeah, and building on that, Kate, Pepsi's had a little bit more experience here, and I think whether you're a small, medium-sized, or large business, there's takeaways that you need to start somewhere. Can you talk a little bit about where you started, any advice, any pitfalls to avoid as people are probably making their journey in the audience?
Happy to, and I think Leah spoke to a bit of that journey that I think we were on, that many organizations are just starting. And it's not by starting with, okay, what should the org chart look like? But it's really recognizing what are the pitfalls that we're seeing, or where is the creator marketing strategy breaking down? Is it that you're facing contract chaos? Is it that multiple teams are competing against each other for the same creators? Do you have the visibility into the spend, into the insights, so that you can really fuel that flywheel of insights and growth? So I think those are the things that you really want to do an audit of, identify what those problem points are, and that becomes your value proposition as you're establishing your COE. Now, when you first set it up, I would say the first thing to do is really start focusing on creating a centralized creator database. That is the Bible for what is going to drive that forward. Beyond that, I think it's also about standardizing creator templates and how those contracts really help provide immediate value to the organization. Now, from a pitfalls perspective, you mentioned, there's a lot that you can fall trap into, but I think some of the key ones I would focus on is don't try and boil the ocean. When you've done that audit, you've identified a few big problem solves to solve. What are those key 2 to 3 challenges that you can really focus on to prioritize? Don't underestimate the challenge of change management. I can speak from PepsiCo's perspective. We are a highly matrixed organization that takes a lot of work and hand-holding to get through. So make sure that you've got the time, make sure that you're doing the training. And I also suggest if you're gonna do those trainings, record them, because we are always finding that there's someone who's missed it that we need to bring on board, and those recordings become so invaluable. But then lastly, I would say one of the most important things is don't put your COE as just a cost center. Really position them as a true collaborator and an enabler of growth and success for your teams. You want them to be seen as a partner in this journey, and that's where you see the appreciation for what we're doing and that really driving that success.
Yeah, and we're going to touch on how do you think about central versus local in a second, but Rob, want to throw over to you. So something that I'm really keen on is pattern recognition, right? And so we've got some amazing influencer marketers in the audience here, But CoEs aren't a unique concept to our category, right? You see it in social, you see it in digital, you see it in media. What can they learn from pattern recognition? You have a ton of background in kind of broader, ad tech, martech. What learnings can we make from kind of more established or longer term categories?
Yeah, I mean, I think the space is mature, right? 32 billion, so it's a massive space, and it warrants a center of excellence. But when I think back to when I was a redheaded stepchild in digital at television companies and print companies, there is a bit of a tipping point, and I tend to look to two things from a COE perspective. Let's say you're a house of brands, or you're a bunch of business units, or even if you have like a broad assortment that is maybe siloed in different ways of working. I tend to look for operational efficiency first, so like where are things slow or breaking down or varied. So you have one group that's doing something particularly well and one that's not being cross-pollinated. Another is impact and efficiency, and so like the outcomes that people are getting to, your teams that are getting to. So you kind of, the light shines, you're like, okay, we need to cross-pollinate, so we need to kind of pull this into a center of excellence that can then service the broader organization. I mean, I think that's true on the enterprise side for sure, and you see that from an operating model or an organizational structure all the time. But I think on mid-market too, the way I like to think about it is, even if you're a small team or a team of one, you still are that center of excellence, if you will. So how do you liaise with the rest of your teams from a technology interoperability perspective? Super important. You might not own the workflow and the stack across the org, but you own your piece, and so what's that interoperability? What are the shared incentives or analytics that you want to work up and down the funnel? I think that's like super important. And so how do you keep those open communications with the rest of your org, from product to front end to design to media to technology, and then drive your part, but really cross-pollinate across the full funnel.
Yeah, and I think the good news is, we were talking about this earlier today, those walls I feel like they're finally breaking down in the industry. I mean, even 5, 7, 10 years ago, social was over here, and creator was over here, and media was over here, and no one was talking, right? And you didn't have that interoperability and sharing across the org. And like Rob said, you can really help drive that with your area of ownership. So Kate, back to you. We just touched on this, but how do you think about what stays, or what moves up to global, so compliance, governance, et cetera, and what stays at the local markets for a multinational like a Pepsi?
Yeah, so you mentioned some of them, and I think it's really about making sure that you're setting up the COE as establishing those guardrails, not roadblocks. You're really helping enable this project and operations. The non-negotiables have to be things like compliance, brand safety, disclosure requirements, measurement frameworks as well. I mean, and these things are set up not just to protect the brands, but the creators as well, because a lot of these are always legally mandated. But when you're talking about things like the creator selection, the creative execution, the local nuances, those absolutely need to be flexed locally, because we need to recognize that a creator in Spain might not resonate the same way in Poland or in India. And that's because the tone might be different market to market, the humor might be different, the nuances of just cultural relevancy might be different. So I think a good rule of thumb is, when you're thinking about this, if it's about risk mitigation or apples to apples comparison, then standardize it globally. If it's about cultural relevance or local nuances, then absolutely localize those capabilities. You just want to keep in mind that the COE is there to provide those frameworks and guardrails to help enable that best work, but the local teams need that autonomy to be able to execute with what works best for their markets, and they know those best.
Leah, maybe the most important question of the day. How does a COE, at least in Adobe, how does it affect the creator experience? Ultimately, where do you see advantages to bring a COE with your creator partners?
Yeah, all the things that Kate said are really important for creating a super consistent creator experience, whether they engage with us in Spain, whether they engage with us for Photoshop or Acrobat, wherever and however they engage with us. It's about creating a consistent experience, because that's ultimately, I think, what leads to the relationship building and the emotional connection with the brand. So for us, that was a huge part of why this was so important, is to create those guardrails, to create the consistent contracting experience, kind of pay rate and framework that we use for that to create the disclosure guidance that all creators that we work with across all teams have to use. So it's not some programs use it and some don't. It's all about facilitating that consistent creator experience so that they feel more connected to the brand regardless of kind of where they're coming in at, what campaign they're working on, whether they're micro or mega. It should be very, very similar across the board.
Kate, you touched on this a little bit earlier, that a COE shouldn't just be a cost center, right? You really need to show the value that you can drive, right? How do you think about effectively communicating the impact of a COE, internally to your superiors, your executive teams, and down to the markets, why it's important for them, why they should buy in?
Yeah, it's a great question that I'm very focused on, making sure that we're proving our value. And I think Rob touched on a bunch of those metrics about operational excellence, as well as those business impact metrics. I think it has to be a two-tiered approach when you're looking at it, and both are very equally important. When you're looking at operational excellence, it's about things like time saved. Are you getting to market faster? Are you getting through the approval process faster? Are you eliminating those roadblocks for your local teams? Risk reduction and brand safety. The mitigation of risk has been almost our #1 goal as we were going into this, and now I feel like we've set those stakes that we're feeling a little bit more comfortable in our approach, and we can evolve beyond that. But cost operations as well. Are we deduplicating some platforms that we're using or streamlining our agencies so that we're not just redundant in those efforts? And then I think lastly, from an operational excellence perspective, is the visibility. That is so important to say, we know exactly what we spent with our creators, we know how they performed, and we know how to optimize our approach moving forward so that we are constantly improving our capabilities. On the business impact side of things, there's the table stakes, the creator performance. So your impressions, your engagements, your EMV, your ROI. There's the relationships as well, though. Are you building longer-term relationships with our creators? And that's what we're endeavoring to, is building really long-lasting relationships and scaling those partnerships. And then I think things like innovation velocity. Are we identifying these opportunities that we can collaborate with our creators to do more and bring those to market faster, identifying those white spaces? So I think that's a big opportunity that we're measuring our success by. And so to do this, though, I think we have to think about how are we bringing it together in a unified approach across our media teams, our marketing science, our insights, and integrating it into existing dashboards so that we're seeing everything in one holistic view. And then on the operational side, how are we making sure that the value realization is there? So both are really important. But then lastly, I don't think we can forget about just those anecdotal results, so survey-based questionnaires to our teams, because sometimes the dashboards don't tell you the things that might be challenging adoption. And so those can unearth some really great nuggets that we can optimize off of.
Rob, anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that was pretty comprehensive.
That was perfect.
But, no, I mean, I'll echo it, though, really. I like the way I think about it is, speed, that operational efficiency, so finding the fastest path to value, impact, so those ROI metrics, and then trust, brand safety. So I think those are the 3 areas you got to mine and find the right KPIs for you and your business.
Cool. So let's. We have one more question, or I'll throw this out to the group. So jump in here. So we'll throw on the crystal ball, right? We've seen just an amazing amount of growth over the last few years. We were talking backstage. The concept of a COE is very fresh for our category. Where do you see it evolving over the next couple of years? What opportunities do you anticipate? Where is this all headed?
Happy to go first. I think that my hope is that the COE evolves from a true just operational hub to a strategic center of intelligence for our organization. As we're doing more, we're learning more, and we're just powering this engine to make us even better. The goal is really moving from just managing our campaigns to truly evolving our approach so that we are evolving with our brands and growing with them in this experience.
I think layering onto that, I see them becoming more precise in terms of how we can identify the right model, the right type of partnership, the right creator for the right campaign. And I also see them becoming more predictive. So on that same vein, we're kind of taking the inputs that we're getting from those campaigns and putting them into kind of that COE and all the learnings and all the goodness to become more predictive in terms of, okay, what's going to work for this next one? How do we model it? How do we optimize it? I think that's really where we're going to go. So we can actually do a better job of coming up with campaigns and plugging into them in a way that right now we're kind of more reactive.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. The models are going to get better over time and really help with that productivity or predictability and outcomes. Rob, anything to add?
I think maybe going a little further out, like I feel like this channel, if you will, is going to get a lot more opportunity and responsibility, particularly in commerce. And so agentic commerce, I've been spending a lot of time in, and I think you'll see some of this convergence or enablement for the creators to really take advantage of agentic commerce and some of the connective tissue that's being built. And so I see that as a very exciting opportunity for the COE to play a bigger role here and maybe take even more ownership in that funnel.
Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Round of applause for our guests. All right. Enjoy the next session. Thanks.